I think the 24-1 project was that idea that you've got to go top to bottom in a development. You know, you talk about housing, it's not just houses, right?
It's not just housing, and residents were the ones that identified the topics that were important to them, and it was everything from housing, economic development, you know, health, job readiness, early childhood, post-secondary, you know, all factors of it. And it's important.
But you have to set up a process for that. And I wonder if Paul McKee has that process in place.
Well, you know, the problem here, Jim, is we're talking about this person, Paul McKee. It's not about Paul McKee. It's about complex relationships. And, you know, if we're trying to figure out what's in Paul McKee's head, then we're not in the right place. We got to figure out all of the different stakeholders and actors in the community, get them around the table and make things happen.
Well, and what's going to be critical, I would surmise, for the success of this development is what we all know, partnerships. You know, no organization, no individual can do something all by themselves. Beyond Housing succeeds because we form critical partnerships with organizations that have a track record of being successful and respectful to the community. And I think that's a key to all of our work.
Is he doing that? Anybody see? You know, maybe he's just setting the stage, and these things need to follow. I mean, I just, you know, Tim, I'm wondering as you follow this, what, you know, you can talk about the groundbreakings and stuff like that and the projects. What should we all be, let me ask you this, what am I missing in all of this, but what should we really be looking for that would be signs of success or going off in the wrong direction? I'll leave that up to you guys, because I bet you have some ideas.
I think at some level we must really always be careful not to pass the wrong responsibility to the wrong people. And so part of what we, the collective us, even at this table, have to think about is when we talk about allowing people to participate, when growth comes, there are certain implications there. If jobs come, we have to make sure that people are ready to participate in work. If there is growth, ultimately what you'll find is that taxes will rise, property taxes will rise, property value will rise. Are people able to manage the finances under those things? And that's not left to a developer. That's our partnerships. That's the collective work of those of us who do this work every day in those communities.
Yeah. You know, I think it's important at the very beginning here to define what success would be. You know, is success we flattened it and build big box stores and people who used to live in these neighborhoods don't live there anymore? Is that success where I can go and shop at a Target down there now? Or is it success where we're building neighborhoods and making it a place where the folks who are there are willing to stay and raise their families and more people are coming to join them? I think that's success.
And along those lines, I would say too, we want to encourage those community members to actually be able to invest in their own community and not just wait for an investor to come and build and develop, but actually how can these community members themselves find, how can we support them in investing and staying long term and becoming homeowners and supporting the growth of their community long term.
And I think success.
The whole issue of not only just home ownership, but business ownership as well, small businesses. I mean, I came from a community where small mom and pop stores and businesses flourished. And that, I think, is an important part of any development, particularly one that is this large. There should be a space in that project where it encourages home ownership, it encourages small business development, and it has some resources in place that will help that happen. Without that, I don't think a project can even begin to think about success. I haven't heard discussions about that as we've talked about and been to public meetings. I've heard about industrial and commercial and infrastructure and housing, but none of the other things that really are people-oriented, as in my perspective, people-oriented. How will people benefit from what's going to happen?
And the research on collective impact and community development and otherwise shows that if things are not intentionally planned for, they will not happen.
Exactly.
So we cannot assume that just because new businesses come in that our residents will get the jobs, will be prepared for the jobs. So intentionality in developing both people and places, which is something that you often talk about, will be critical to the success of any community development project.
I think all these issues we talked about today are in place. As I said earlier today, I was just in a meeting today with Paul, with the members of the Northside Regeneration Workforce Coalition. I have relationships with all the organizations at this table. The implementation will be key, but the components are in place. We just have to move forward and be very vigilant and very serious about partnership in this community. But these things are in place. They've been presented, they're part of the plan, and we're going down the road of partnership. So I'm very optimistic about the implementation of Northside Regeneration.
And I think that success to me, I just want to look bigger and broader than this project. It's looking at these structural failures in our city government that this project sort of bucked against. So everybody from the community to Paul McKee complains about, well, there wasn't the framework for good planning, and someone like McKee had to come in here. And then elected officials in turn said, well, we have to dream big. Well, I want to see elected officials in city government dream as big for the Land Revitalization Authority and its future, and for urban planning and for the planning department as they do for Paul McKee. If this is inevitable and these bills are passing 25-2 to do something on this scale, why can't we put the same political weight behind the structural components we need to avoid this sort of mess again?
Well, I mean, the fact is that Paul McKee, is one of the largest campaign donors. He has a machine in place to be able to make City Hall work for him. It's not something that most developers have. It's not that most small business people have. And through his buying and through his politics, he's become the big fish there. And so he has a lot of the leverage now. There was a time some years ago, you remember, where there was more opposition from elected officials, but
How did that happen?
he owns so much of that area now that it's almost too big to fail in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, this is a trend happening in cities around the country where you have wealthy individuals really taking over the functions of government, and in some ways you have to give them, you have to cheer them on, right? At least they're stepping into a gap. But on the other hand, to me, it's worrisome if it doesn't, because we don't have the right to the information. We don't have rights to know about what's going on behind the scenes when a private developer owns the land. If it's a public agency, there are certain protections. So, it's something that's happening in Detroit, in Seattle. New York had Mayor Bloomberg, who himself was a billionaire who would give hundreds of millions of dollars to urban projects. So we're entering a new era, and I think we have to have ways to hold it accountable.
Yeah, I wonder if we're...